everyone. Today we're going to see this drawing that I did with charcoal. It's from last year. I'm really slow with editing videos, so much so that I have a bunch from previous years. We won't let it go to waste, so we're looking at it today. And next time we will see the same subject in oils. I usually use a viewfinder mostly to find the subject and focus on the subject, as opposed to using it for composition. When I am out in plein air, I just get a sense of where everything fits, and then I go with my gut. It's a sketch. I don't want to stress over composition. Sometimes when it's on a larger 9x12 or so paper, I want to use grid lines, but without using grid lines, so I just put marks, and then I use my pinky like a little snob, and basically that becomes my verticals, and I can determine, where things go. The first line is often the horizon or the base, and then I've missed a lot of the footage, but basically it took me a long time to put the large rocks where they needed to go, because everything is composed around this triangle, and it was important to get those proportions right, at least right to my eye. At this point I start putting in some of the high grass, just getting a sense where things overlap, what grass goes in front of which rock, what comes in the back, and which ones are in fact more like stems and thicker than just grass. Now I'm putting in the ground, which is, as you can see, the lightest green because it is the short grass. I do it horizontally and I smudge it because it is the lightest green. I am also concerned with putting in some of the moving high grass and stems by adding diagonals. Everything looks a little more dynamic that way. When I filled most of the background, which is the actual subject, I start putting in my darkest darks, basically looking at the shadow areas of the rocks and where the reflection starts, which is usually feels like almost a black line. If you look at a pond or a lake or anything reflective, the moment the image hits the reflection, that's where sometimes the darkest values are. When it comes to putting in the reflected objects, I usually darken everything, and I do it with vertical lines to denote that it's a reflection, but I usually start putting the water darker because it is going to be darker and I might forget. So direct reflection is going to be darker, so I darken the water and I start putting in the reflected object. Sometimes it's a little tricky trying to paint upside down because especially diagonals are going to be the opposite way in the reflection. And here I am darkening everything a little more, putting in more details of what the rocks look like, and putting in darker and darker water. Sometimes I have more ease with verticals and horizontals and vice versa, so I turn my paper around to be able to do straightish lines. In this case, I'm doing these lines to denote the water, also horizontally the same way as the grass, only lighter, because at this point maybe you don't see it, but that area of the small pond was reflecting the blue sky. When dealing with reflective subjects, I like sometimes drawing in this case, the high grass, and then putting in the reflection immediately after so I don't forget to put in the reflected object. At this point, I realize I'm not going to be able to respect the values of the things I'm seeing, simply because there's so many different greens, and if I'm only doing some charcoal, it's monochrome, no color, so how I'm going to represent the red irises or the yellow flowers? I won't really be able to. So I started the flowers ended up being some of my darkest values because I wanted to look like flowers, and I didn't have color, so anything really red became really black, and that was okay with me. Basically, since red was the opposite of green and I wanted my red to pop in a world of gray, black was going to pop. As I darkened the flowers, I realized I needed to darken some of the stems. It also helped me build the layers. So I had the rocks and the grass, and then I had the darker stems, layer upon layer upon layer. That's one of the ways you can build depth in a painting. So you have object in front of another object, texture next to other texture, changes in value, so dark and light and then dark, or vice versa. One of the things I really love about plein air painting and drawing is that differently from pictures, you notice different things at different times. I had forgotten about that little plant I was just drawing, and at that point I remember noticing it and going like, oh yes, of course. And this is why also you sometimes really need to, the moment you put an object in and it has a reflections, to put it immediately afterwards, because sometimes you forget. When you do plein air, you need to take your time because you'll notice things as you go along, and things are not where you would imagine them to be. Everything makes sense when you look at it, but if I were to draw this from, not from memory, but from imagination completely, I would think the reflected flowers would be further down, where it's not the case. They're further back, therefore only the very top of the flowers were being reflected, and it really was the sky that was taking most of the reflection. I start charcoal paintings and drawings with line charcoal, then move on to compressed charcoal, and then I finish with charcoal pencil because I go for more details at the end. And usually it's a lot more difficult to lift. I can get a lot better darks, and the fact that it is, well, not pointy, because I often cannot sharpen my charcoal pencils very well when I do plein air. I use a really good sharpener at home, but it's one of those crank sharpeners which I cannot really bring plein air with me. Well, I've done it. I just feel a little, forgive the expression, I feel a little stupid when I bring it, because it's this huge crank sharpener and I look so weird. Who cares? Well, apparently I do. I apparently feel very embarrassed if I bring it outside and everybody can look at me. Not only is she drawing and painting outside, people get curious. Look at her with her big crank sharpener. Sorry. that was a mosquito. They sometimes come and attack you when you least expect it. So I ended up doing a lot of the high grasses and, you know, added texture with the charcoal pencil. It's so funny because I literally use this as a shorthand to like represent very scraggly flora. I think everybody develops their own shorthand with the marks they make. And I think one of the major things I learned from doing plein air drawings is really mark making. As you go along, you discover ways of pushing the medium round, and you're like, ooh, if I twist my wrist while doing this and lift up, it's going to be a very wispy line, but it's going to be like with a curve. Or if I do it very quickly while my hand is resting on the paper, then they can be very small, strong lines. And it's all in your body, and it's muscle memory at some point. I don't even think about some of the lines I make because I know it in my hand, I know it in my posture, I know the type of pressure I'm putting in. When I paint on plein air, I go from one area to another. I don't focus on only one. I move around, I darken values. At this point, I finished a lot of the values in the grass and realized I needed to focus on the water and on lightening things. And I've put a lot of my darks, but I need the reflection to look like reflections. I need water to look like water, and water sparkles. Therefore, I am lifting a lot because darks have no meaning if there's no lights, and lights don't have any meaning if there's no darks. I think I went a little too far with all the lines I did in the water, and I think as I was doing it, I realized afterwards sometimes you don't see things until you take some distance. At this point, I am lifting some in squiggly lines because these are high grasses that have like texture. And that is it. This is my charcoal drawing of this pond. Next time the video will be this pond in oils. All the materials I use will be listed in the description. Now tell me what you would like to see. I do oils, soft pastels, watercolors, wash, graphite, charcoal. I am starting to dabble with oil pastels. But what do you use? Do you do plein air? And what would you be curious to see? Until next time, take care, have a lovely summer. Ciao!